Call this meeting of the Brattleboro Development Review Committee to order. It's 7:05 p.m. on May 16th. As a preliminary matter, as those in the audience no doubt can tell, we have a short board tonight, 5 members. The quorum is 4, so we're going to go forward with the meeting. But applicants, in order to have their applications accepted, need 4 votes, a majority of the 7, even though we only have 5 here. And for some applications, because Mr. Annis has to recuse himself, those are applications 2016-58 and 2016-61, the 2 Winston Prouty related applications. We're going to have a board of 4. My understanding is that we have an additional member, Mr. Gouen, who's going to watch a video and vote, right, Brian?
That's correct.
Do we have that representation from anyone else, or was it just him? Just him. So there will be one extra voter who is not present here tonight, who's going to review the record and vote on the record. However, in situations like these, which we regret, we generally offer to applicants that if they wish to continue their application in order to get a full board, rather than a board of 5 or 6 with 4 or 5 present, like we'll have tonight, we generally grant those motions to continue without prejudice. As a preliminary matter, I understand that the applicant, Marble Dealership Realty, wishes to continue for that reason, and I'd rather let them go home tonight before we get into everything else. Is that correct? Is the applicant or the applicant's representative here?
Yes.
Okay, if you could just identify yourself in the microphone so we have a record of this.
My name is David Gale, and I am a partner with Marble Dealership Realty.
Okay, and you'd like to continue so you could get a full board to hear the
Yes,
application? Okay. Can we have a motion on that one application to continue, 2016-25?
I move we continue.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so you can go home. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, and we're going to work to try to get a full board for the next hearing, because we know that this is the second time this has happened to you folks. Okay?
I thank the board.
Okay, thank you. So, back to the normal procedure of the meeting. I read opening remarks before every meeting. I'm sure a couple of the people in here have heard them a few times, and I'm sorry to those people. But this is to explain the procedures we use and how this works, and how it works if you want to appeal down the road. So I urge you to pay attention if you're interested in that. At the DRB, we hear applications for land development in the town of Brattleboro and appeals of zoning administrator decisions. Procedurally, the Development Review Board operates on the record. Broadly, this means that we take a clear record of testimony, that's why we're recording and we have a video, from the applicant and any interested parties, and then issue a written decision with our findings. Applicants and members of the public should be aware that as we are on the record, this is your chance, and perhaps your only chance, to comment on and provide evidence relating to an application. In the event our decision is appealed to the Environmental Court, the court will not take or consider additional new evidence at its hearing. What they'll do is look at the evidence from our hearing, the regulations or the applicable law, and determine if the evidence from this hearing supports the findings and decision of this board. They may agree, they may not, but there will be no new evidence. Only interested persons that participate in this proceeding are allowed to appeal a decision made by this board. So I strongly urge you to speak up at the hearing. Because we're on the record, whenever someone speaks about an application, we ask that that be in the form of sworn testimony. So if you think there is even a small iota of a chance you might wish to speak to an application tonight, I'd ask you to stand and raise your right hand, and I'm going to swear you in. And we can always do it later, but this is easy. We just do it once. It saves time. Okay, so if you could raise your right hand. Do you hereby swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in the cause under consideration will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury? Okay. Now, if you've not been sworn in and you change your mind, if you could just please tell me you were not sworn in. Because if you say something on the record and it's not sworn testimony, then the people you might want to appeal to later may not consider that. Applicants require a majority vote of the full board to succeed. That's 4 votes out of 7. As I outlined earlier tonight, that really means 4 votes out of the 6 people total and 5 who are present for most applications. And in the case of the Music Center and the Winston Prouty Center applications, that's going to be 4 live people present and a 5th who's going to watch by video. Excuse me. After taking testimony, the board will close the public hearing and may vote on your application. The board will issue a written decision within 45 days of the close of the hearing. While we may vote on an application, it is the written decision of the board that controls the timeline for the appeal. It should be noted that the town of Brattleboro is a party with an interest in land development applications. The town does not have a special status before this board. Documents provided to the board by the town planning department, the town attorney, or any other town representative will be considered in exactly the same way as information from an applicant or another interested party. The first item of business we have is to approve our last minutes from the April 18th, 2016 meeting. Can I have a motion?
I move we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Bannon, has our meeting been properly warned?
Yes, it has.
I know that Mr. Annis, because he disclosed earlier, has a conflict of interest in applications 2016-58 and 2016-61. Those are the Winston Prouty for the Brattleboro Music Center and the Winston Prouty by itself applications. Are there any other conflicts of interest or ex parte communications that need to be disclosed? I suppose I should note that my child was in lessons at the Brattleboro Music Center for a time and continues, or I'm sorry, she continues to be. And I think the representative for the applicant, her daughter and I were friends, but I don't think those relationships rise to a level where it creates a conflict of interest.
My sister plays in the Wyndham Orchestra, and I have a brother-in-law and a husband that sing with Blanche Faith
Okay.
Chorale. So, but I haven't discussed the plans with them.
They offered you any money for your vote?
No.
Okay.
I wish they had.
Yeah. So, any other conflicts of interest or ex parte communications or disclosures you want to put on the record? Okay, hearing none. The first application in light of the continuation of the Marble Dealership Realty application is 2016-58. That's the Brattleboro Music Center for Winston Prouty Child Development Center. Come up to the table when you're ready. And could you please say who you are so we have a record and the people at home can tell who you are?
First, I'm John Goodell from SVE Associates,
Okay.
Engineer. Philip Cheney from Scott Simons Associates, architect. If I can just a minute. Get our apparatus so everybody can see it.
We can actually, see those 3 light switches down there? If you're able to do the bank of lights that's right in front of those. That'll give you some sharpness.
Okay, so do we need to sit here?
Well, you need to be picked up by that long microphone on the table.
Yeah.
And if you speak clearly, it will work within 10 or 15 feet. If you're pointing things out on your projection, if you could just try to remember that the cameraman is trying to pick that up so that the people who watch us can see it. So try not to stand in that line of sight.
Okay. Okay, so again, I'm John Goodell from SPD Associates and Phil Cheney from Scott Simon. I'm the civil engineer on this job, and Phil is one of the architects that we're working with the BMC for their project. And the presentation we want to make here tonight is first to try and give you an overview. Likely that you're familiar with the site, but even so, big picture, kind of what we're proposing to do, and then I want to just hit on a few kind of key items that have come up over the course of the project, and then we'll walk through your site plan and conditional use criteria, for this project. So I'll just lead right off with kind of an overview of the project, and this is taken from, I think, the Vermont Environmental Atlas, but basically we're out here on Guilford Street. This is the Memorial Park over here, and the existing Winston Prouty site is here. I apologize for everyone that's trying to look through me here. So there it is, and I'll try and mention a few of the elements that are going to come up later when we go through the various points, but certainly one of them is that for larger events, or for when if there is a recital or something, as part of this project, or as part of their plan, they have been working for an agreement with the rec department to share the use of this parking over here, which again, it's a secondary use. Their primary use is actually music school, which they are self-contained within their site. But for these occasional events, which, as mentioned in the narrative, that's the initial one. And then, of course, they have a history of making it work with a site that has basically no parking. So they're adept at structuring their events and timing things and working with groups in town and so forth. Gotta point the right thing. There we go. Oops, one too many. There we go. Look at the timing. This is the existing conditions plan that was in your packet, and basically shows what we just were looking at. It shows the existing school, paved areas, Winston Prouty Way here, steep bank along the Whetstone Brook over on this side. By the end of the night, I'll have this down.
I do this all the time.
It's a little lag here. Perhaps my sensor is just in the wrong spot.
Keeps you on your feet, though.
Okay, and then again, from your packet, this is the site plan, which notably shows an expansion to the front of the building, changes to the parking here. This is the auditorium accessory structure here, and then parking with a cul-de-sac design, down here on this end, and then just an access road that leads to the dumpster in the back, and also for a fire lane to the back. Okay, and just a picture of Winston Prouty Way from Guilford Street for trying to get everybody oriented where we are. Similarly, this is some existing vegetation just as you get into the lot. Basically, this is the vegetation between the school buildings on the left and the neighbors are on the right. Similarly, there's just a existing school. And then we'll be talking a little bit more about this later. This is starting someplace in here is where the buffer would start, and this is the existing condition for, for that area. And one of the BMC's positions will be that they would like it to be remain as grass and lawn as opposed to a requirement that it revegetate to woody vegetation. So this is just a shot of what's there. We can come back to it if we need to. And then Phil, if you want to, so there's the laser pointer up there.
All right, and then just advance with the,
Actually, page forward,
plus.
page back, and you have to press it once and then wait.
all right,
Is the trick.
excellent. Philip Cheney with Scott Simons Architects. So I'll just do a brief sort of description of the building and the way it's interacting with the site. This first plan here is the site lighting plan, just showing the sort of basic idea of lighting the parking and having limited building lights on the building where there are the emergency exits, keeping the fall off all within the property line, as close to 0 foot candles as possible, and providing even distributed site lighting for safety and general navigation. This is the current planting plan. So this has been derived using the Brattleboro standards with a selection of the plantings as well as a sort of distribution. Additionally, we're going to maintain as much as possible all existing plantings along the property line here.
I'm sorry, it just took me a little too long. Can you go back one for
Yeah.
1 second?
Page.
What's the number value on the bottom edge?
That is 0.1 foot candles here.
Okay.
And that was a strategy to maintain an even amount of lighting, so there were no hot spots here. And so there's this one light that does push 0.1 foot candles over the property line towards the brook.
Is it 0.1 because it's facing the other way, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
where is the line where you get your first significant lighting? From the bottom. Can you show me with the laser pointer?
The first significant,
Not 0.1, but
not 0.1.
you know, something that is,
Yeah, sorry, I can't read it up there. So you get to essentially, say 2.1, approximately right there, which is
Okay.
the end of the parking spaces themselves. So about 18 feet from the edge of the.
okay.
And these are full cutoff 12-foot pole LED fixtures, so they don't do any wash anything up or out too far.
And is it all 0.1 as you go up the left side as well, or the west side, however you prefer to say it?
Right here.
Yeah, if you went
Yes.
up.
This is primarily 0.
Okay.
Those where it turns black, those are 0.1s, and they're well within the property.
Okay.
line. Otherwise, we've tried to keep 0 all the way along there and have
Okay.
no washout to the abutting properties.
On your packet too, I think the 11 by 17s, I believe they're legible.
I just couldn't find it quickly enough,
Okay.
and then he had gone on, and I figured I ought to say something before I interrupted too
Too bad.
far down the line.
And also, this is to get everyone sort of oriented, and then we'll go through each of the criteria. So we'll be talking about lighting again here later.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to knock you off here.
And actually, just to that point, additionally, the lighting engineers were working off an older plan, and since then, the cul-de-sac itself has actually moved further into the site, bringing the foot candles even further away from the property line.
Okay.
So back to the planting plan. Again, the idea is to maintain all existing plantings that currently exist at the property line, and then do additional planting to enhance the buffer between the new parking and the building itself, and provide both visual and sound buffers if there is any traveling sound. And also, as you'll see on the next slide, there's been, through the sort of the neighborhood meeting, there's descriptions of what currently exists and how there's a beautiful view corridor through the site where you get a good vantage point to look at the hills beyond. And we've since adjusted the planting plan so that there's low-lying shrub plantings here rather than any tall trees to help maintain that, so that the neighborhoods can still have the view they have. I think that also reinforces the not having the woody plants take over the current lawn, is to maintain what is there, because there's a lot of support to keep that because they really enjoy it.
This is current, though.
Yes,
a
this
current
is
plan.
the same as what was submitted, except for the version you have showed some plantings in the stormwater pond, but the number is staying the same,
Okay.
but we just shuffled them out of the pond. So I think.
Okay.
And so the basic floor plan, I'll actually step back. So as you can see in John's drawings, the addition to the existing building is to the west, entirely on the front of the existing building, and the addition is to the south of the current Winston Prouty building. And so what we did architecturally is we tried to keep the most sound-sensitive program in the new addition because the quality of construction is going to be much higher than what's currently there. So the internal sound will be better for the recital hall, as well as sound traveling inwards from the exterior and coming out. And also couple that with all the public program and use the lobby spaces to buffer sound coming out, as well as having better protection and security on site, and clearly identifying entry to both the music school and the recital auditorium.
Okay, I think that's sort of, a little more here, I guess.
And so there is a mezzanine level. This is just showing that there is a sort of double height volume towards the front of the recital auditorium that gains access to the mezzanine. And then you'll see the roof lines here. And as John will note, this will come into play pretty soon.
Right. Again, this is just to give you a sense of, this is our project. So we're going to look at this again in more detail once we are talking about compatibility and things. But just to give you a snapshot, here it is. This is the building.
And so this is the west elevation facing the parking area and the abutting property line and neighbors. And the idea was really to sort of take the formal simplicity of the typical barn and try to incorporate that into this new building, because being the sort of this backyard program, it has some connotations to the old barns that are in the backyard of residential settings, and trying to acclimate the sort of commercial program into it. And so the idea is to really use materials that reference that weather, that change, that really react to the sort of Vermont environment. So the idea is to use a rough sawn barden board and a self-weathering metal siding, and the two kind of play off of each other to break down the scale of the buildings, so that it doesn't seem large and ominous in the backyards. And then this is the east elevation here. It is facing the Whetstone Brook. You'll see two notes of where mechanical equipment will be, and that's going to come up in a little bit. But we just wanted to show that with the new addition, there's going to be an increase in building height, and that's going to help mask and sort of enclose existing mechanical equipment and any future mechanical equipment that is located on the roofs.
Which leads me to my next part. So that was our introduction. This is our site, and this is our building that we're talking about. Before I go to walk through the specific site plan conditional use review criteria, there were a few things, just a few points that we thought we'd just make right up front, because they may be the most interesting ones. And one lead-off one, which came up when we met with the abutters, and we stood in their kitchen and we talked to folks, was a question about the noise associated with the HVAC system, the heat pumps and so forth that you're going to be using there. And we couldn't answer it at that time because it was still in design. But Phil and his group have put together a presentation to try and talk directly to that. So you could go for it.
So what currently exists at the Winston Prouty building is essentially rooftop units that are just plopped right on the existing brick building, which are these smaller units. And then on the newer wood-clad addition, there is one large unit that is right on the roof with no sound protection barrier or anything. It just falls off into the site. And so with our proposed addition to the west, facing the property line and the abutting neighbors, The addition is proposed to be 6 feet taller than the existing building. And so that's going to shield what currently exists on site, as well as any future equipment that will be on the roof. At the point of the wood-clad building that has a larger existing equipment, it's going to be slightly taller, not as large of a sort of barrier as at the existing brick building, but it'll provide a little bit of a sound buffer, but more so a visual buffer that you don't see it. You'll see in the existing photos how clearly apparent the mechanical equipment is at the existing building. And at the,
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
oh, sorry.
Are you saying there's going to be like a screen from the south on the existing unit in the lower picture there?
No. I was just depicting towards the west that we're building up and out with
Okay.
that one.
Okay, what about to the south?
To the south is the sort of heavily vegetated hillside and the Whetstone Brook itself, that a lot of that cancels out any sound from the existing units. I think during the neighborhood meeting, they said currently there is no sound issue from the closest properties, and they were worried and concerned that with the addition of the recital auditorium and the expansion, that there'll be more mechanical equipment that'll add to or create unnecessary noise.
Okay.
And so at the recital auditorium, just the general location is behind the double height lobby that has the stairs to access the mezzanine. So there's a very large vertical 15-foot buffer between the mechanical equipment to the west towards the abutting properties. And there has been discussions about towards the south with our acoustical engineer that there probably will be some sound attenuation screens around this equipment, because the sort of first priority is to not let any of the sound go into the auditorium itself. So just to give some idea of what sort of equipment could be used, well, we just broke ground on a 32-bed dormitory, similar size, similar scale, similar need to separate and zone equipment. And this is the sort of the line that we used. This is a split heat pump system, and you can't really read it. But so I noted what the decibels are, and there's two levels of decibels. The sound coming from the equipment, it's louder during the winter than it is during the summer, and so out of this whole range, we mapped out the worst case scenario, which is a 58 decibels noise, and the way they measure that is in a soundproof box, which is approximately 12 feet by 12 feet. And so there's a formula to sort of figure out the degradation of decibels along a distance. And so as a sort of rough analysis, in the winter, the worst case scenario of 58 decibels at the 87 feet, and then at 187 feet, which is the closest neighbor here. At the property line, this is uninterrupted. This doesn't take into account any plantings or any vertical buffer, just uninterrupted sound. You've got about 35 decibels at the property line, 28.4 at the closest abutting neighbor. Whoops. During the summer, it decreases. They run quieter during the summer when they're cooling versus heating. And again, we're at uninterrupted 31.39 decibels at the property line, 24.4 decibels at the closest abutting neighbor. And so additionally, so we've got the planting. Planting does help break down decibels as it passes through. We're not going to say that there's going to be a 5 to 10% reduction, but we are using a mix of trees and shrubs as the sort of visual buffer, which also aids in the acoustical buffer as well. And so what does that mean? So at the property line, when it's in the 30 decibel range, which is the uninterrupted, doesn't take into account the vertical buffer of the building and the plantings, you're right around the sound level of a quiet bedroom at night, quieter than a library, a little bit louder than the background noise in the TV studio. So it is almost, it's very quiet, very quiet. And that is, again, before taking into account the vertical buffer and the plantings themselves. And as, just relating it to the regulations, in a residential neighborhood from 7 to 10, there's allowable 55 decibels. And then from 10 at night to 7 in the morning, there's allowable 45 decibels. And that's measured 1 foot beyond the property line. And so we're well beyond that, below that. And the idea is really using the efficient equipment environmentally, which is good practice, also results in much quieter equipment because bearings are better, motors are better, there's less resistance, there's less vibration.
Okay, great. Thanks, Phil. So I have just a couple more points, but just to wrap that up, and our initial position was this is not an issue. This is modern equipment, modern technology, and so forth. But the BMC specifically asked that we address that because it was brought up, and the BMC is trying very hard to be sensitive and to be a good neighbor and wants to set that precedent now and plans to do it going forward. So that's why, Phil took the time to go through that. That basically, it's quiet, and the new stuff is good and it works. But by putting some numbers to it, that takes it to another level of demonstrating. So just a couple other items that I wanted to mention before I start walking through the criteria. Just one of them was talking about a little more about traffic or traffic coming and going, and specifically the auxiliary groups associated with the BMC, the orchestra, the choir, the chorale. It was an important point for me when I kind of got it that this facility and this site is really a place where they fine-tune their instrument, is the base case. The goal behind this project is not necessarily that we're going to build a performance space and we're going to try and get lots of people to come to our space. That the mission is more about what these groups do when they go out into the community and they go in big venues and so forth. But within that, they need to rehearse, typically once a week for each of those. And then occasionally for the chorale and for the choir, occasionally, as in single digits per year, would have a event, at this site too. But so it was an important point I wanted to make, that it's actually part of their mission, that they don't want to build the fortress and then pull up the drawbridge and just try and do their thing. They're a community organization, and so having music played out in venues throughout the community is very much a part of who they have been and very much a part of who they continue to be. It's part of their mission. So that starts to explain why, for the number of parking spaces we have and the relationship we're talking about with the rector, it basically works with their proposed use. So that was just one point. And then the other point I wanted to make was just on the buffer. Now how fast we can go back. And I don't know that it's particularly, sorry Phil, we're going to have to cycle through. Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
I guess we'll go back a little bit further. There it is. So again, just to restate before I start going through the criteria, this is one area where the BMC's position is that, don't fix it if it ain't broke, kind of thing. In that there's good lawn, there's a playground area over here, and actually let me help you get you oriented on this, just so when we start talking about that specifically. Let's go back even further. Okay. So we are talking about, this here is the 50-foot riparian area. And again, I'm speaking to staff comments here on the question of a 25-foot
setback. So this is the area in the picture you were just looking at with the playground. The existing playground was here. I was standing here when I took that picture, kind of looking over this way. So this is the edge where that fence is, and the playground area was here, and so forth. So this is the strip that the BMC would like it to remain lawn, and then over here where they pull out the playground equipment, that they would propose to return it to lawn as opposed to playground, as opposed to a requirement that it must grow up with 25 feet of woody brush. Okay, and then I guess I am going to interject one other thing just quickly on the staff comments. I don't think there's any objection to the comments from the fire chief, of which a number of them I think are probably fairly boilerplate. Notable here was, on this plan I show a flushing hydrant, and the chief's request was that we show just a fire hydrant. Entirely logical and no objection to that. And I guess I should perhaps read through them. Okay, let's see, and so that was the only thing that, yeah, no objections to the fire department's requirements there. I'll use yours. Which I don't think I need to read through all those. And then similarly on, let's see, there was, I don't think there was anything else in there that we saw that was in any way objectionable, other than just as I've mentioned a couple times, the question about the buffers, the only question mark that we saw from the staff comments. Okay, so now that we've been going at it, and it may be time to run through these criteria. And so again, I'm just coming right from figure 4.3 of the zoning, the development review criteria for, in this case, it'll be a shared site plan conditional use approval. And again, it's site plan approval because we're building something, conditional use approval because the use is, as was previously found, it's a music school which is was previously determined to be the same as a grammar school, which is a conditional use for this zoning district. Okay. Okay, so compatibility. Again, as stated in the narrative, and I'll try not to be brief, but please ask if there's any, if you'd like more detail. The proposed land development will not, actually well, I'll read what I wrote here. The residential neighborhood zone is comprised of a high to moderate density residential neighborhoods, walkability and proximity to public transit, neighborhood stores, schools, parks, and other amenities are among the characteristics common to the residential zoning district. This project is fully consistent with the town plan's land use goals of reinforcing a compact, mixed-use development pattern that promotes walkability. Character of the area. So the requirement is the proposed land development will not alter the existing or planned character of the area as defined by the purpose of the applicable zoning district. Again, as I just mentioned, is also as Phil talked about when he was talking about the building, the building has been designed to fit with the character of the area. And maybe this is a moment where you can make sure that we cover that. Another site plan at the end would have been helpful. Oops, let me just steal your thunder here.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, so maybe just again to address both compatibility and character of the area.
Phil, if you want to
Yeah.
take a moment to talk a little bit, this is about how the building fits within the site.
So this is the existing western facade of the Winston Prouty building. And it is a little hard to tell actually in this photo, but you can see just as I mentioned, the large air handling units here. You can see all the handling units on the roof here, which architecturally is never that pleasing. And so what we plan on doing is, here's the addition, and there's the taller portion of the recital hall, and that will screen all the existing equipment and any new equipment. And you can see how the very simple forms of two distinct materials help break down the sort of length and breadth of the facade, as well as helps organize the site as far as where you enter the building, which is framed between the two larger weathering metal boxes, and under the large canopy that frames the public entrance to both the auditorium and to the recital, the music school. And just looking at it from the other angle of the northeast, so this is from the property line at the western abutting properties. Here you can clearly see the existing rooftop unit here. And what we propose is you can start to see more of the sort of connecting canopy with a space underneath it. And there is a large aperture cut through that to help control and allow light into the space. And the auditorium with a double height volume that is access to the mezzanine level, as well as a double height lobby space. And then the strategy of bringing those spaces forward in front of the auditorium and bringing the lobby areas in front of all the studios in the music school helps buffer any internal noise that is happening during any recital or performance, having that space break the sound down.
Good. Good. Okay, so again, a focused effort on fitting it into the neighborhood, and not just bringing something from outer space in here, but trying to look intelligently at what's there and what makes sense.
Yeah, actually, the site plan really evolved through a good, close collaboration between both SVE and Scott Simons. We went back and forth trying to figure out the less impactful way to get emergency access and the appropriate number of parking spaces on this site without having excess impervious surfaces. And with the riparian buffer to the southeast, it really made it was this fine tuning of where the auditorium can be and where where vehicle access can be. And this was really, we felt, exciting plan that evolved out of it.
Okay, so moving on to traffic, I'm going to skip back to something that shows site plan. And you will get to see this apparently many times before we are done tonight. So there we have it. So, oops, one more time. Again, in terms of, I'll blend traffic and vehicular access and circulation here. Of course, Guilford Street, cars come in, and it's two-way traffic through here, and then we have one-way through here with parking on the side broken up, accordingly. Okay, and then speaking again specifically to the traffic question, for the base case, and also a little more information just on BMC and traffic and their operation. They have a busy period or a more busier period, which tends to mirror the school year, September through June, and then a reduced and slightly changed program in the summertime.
But just in terms of traffic, their base case is lessons and being a music school, but as that works with the folks that are coming, and you may well know this better than I do if you have or know people that have gone to BMC, it's distributed. So both in terms of when the lessons are, as opposed to a typical school where everyone comes in the morning and then everyone leaves at night, oftentimes corresponding with the peak morning and peak evening flows, there's 2 to, well, we call for 3 to 5, but 2 to 3, or ultimately, who knows, maybe up to 5, or potentially 5 staff that are there full time, and then teachers that would come when their lessons are scheduled. We tried to bound it with a conservative fashion of around 19 for that number, which was perhaps a little high, but we're trying to be, again, conservative in our presentation. But that, again, is distributed over the course of the week. The auxiliary groups, the choir, the chorale, the orchestra, again, are typically once a week practice. The orchestra has 90 members, so clearly they're not going to all park here, so that becomes a case where they would carpool, in ways that they've been doing for years, I'm sure. Carpool, and particularly nice at this site, park at the rec, which is schedulable, very schedulable, because it's their practice session once per week in the evening. And then same goes for the choir, which I believe is 60 members.
Reverse that, 60 for the orchestra, 90 for the choir.
Okay, I will reverse that then. 60 for the orchestra and 90 for the choir, plus or minus. And then for the chorale, 30 members. But the point being that limited use at off-peak times, I guess, is the essential points. And why that they would go to all this effort if they needed a parking lot with 100 spaces, then they certainly would have directed us that way, hey, we need this. But it seemed like the ideal opportunity sort of to mesh with what the new zoning ordinance was trying to encourage folks to do, was to utilize community resources that at times when they're not getting used otherwise. And so that's why they have become very comfortable with 34 parking spaces. And just a little more detail on that. That number was worked out in consultation with Brian. Basically, what we did there was consider the 225 seats for the auditorium as the controlling number to design around. And per the zoning ordinance, that ratio for required minimum parking is 6 seats per, 6 spaces, wait, no, let's try that again, 1 per 6 spaces, there we go. 1 space per 6 seats.
Yes.
Righto. Yes, I knew what I meant to say. So 1 parking space per 6 seats in the auditorium equates to 37.5 seats. We show 34, and we're encouraged not to go ahead and try and squeeze in a few more. Again, because of our base use and the limited times that they would be doing that and so forth. But that is, those are sort of the numbers driving it. For reference, the usage associated with the school, again from the zoning ordinance, is trickier in that they have very little office space, and that calculation is dependent on office space. So we would end up with a much lower number on the order of like a minimum of 10 spaces, which is far too few. So these are some of the things that went into this, but needless to say, we worked it lots of different ways, and ultimately arrived at a balanced approach that we felt meshed
in both the goals of minimizing planting pavement you don't need with achieving both circulation and the main parking that you really need. And of course, it works for this site because of the auxiliary parking that's located not too far away. Okay, so
Can I jump in for a second?
you bet.
Is there a formalized agreement with the town at the moment,
They,
even if it's not written? in
well,
terms of onsite?
Mary has an email from Rick Carol a lot that basically stating that they're in agreement that they can work together at off-peak times and times when the parking is available to schedule parking. And of course they've been talking about this for several months now. And
What's the definition of off-peak time that everybody's using?
well, I think okay, in terms of the off-peak, I'm thinking of 7 to 7:30 in the morning to 9:30. Typical rush hour, people coming and going to work. Which, for the larger events here, the folks that are going to be participating in them do work, so that they would generally not schedule them when they're trying to get home from work or so forth. They schedule them later, so more like 7 to 9 p.m. at night, or on Sunday, or so forth. So that, again, it's self-limiting by the nature of who attends these. In terms of the area traffic, the other traffic that's happening in the area. And then with respect to the rec department, they of course have any number of larger events in that region of town, which become the icebergs that BMC needs to steer around effectively. But again, the BMC's position is that they are very comfortable with that, and with that level of agreement, with the town, that understand that town, your large events come first, but we can work with you, and didn't necessarily see the need to try and craft that flexibility into some sort of a formal legal agreement, because of course they would be they see their role as required to work within the town schedule, for the park, and are comfortable with that.
What would happen if they weren't able to use the lot?
The Living Memorial Park. Then,
Yeah.
in the same way that they've done for years, as part of that program, and I'm speaking for them here, they would come up with a solution. They would come up with carpooling. They would come up with an invitation that says you'll be parking here, potentially the farmer's parking lot. There's other parking. There's a lot of parking in the area without cars in it, for any number of times. That's, I think, at the very heart of what the zoning is trying to get to, is to trying to create that sense of, we're going to work out a solution to this, rather than, well, I'll just build my own and then I don't have to worry about it. And it's been part of their history too, just finding ways to make it work. So that's why they're, again, are comfortable that they have the flexibility within both scheduling their events and the nature of their events, to coordinate with available parking.
If you did increase the on-site parking, you would also be increasing the amount of erosion going down those slopes, right?
Well, it's a pretty easy site in terms of stormwater, only because we're sitting on well-drained gravels here, and then we have, I did do test pits for the design of this stormwater basin, and it gets a little more sandy for a layer, and then you're sitting on gravel. So there's not a current issue, and then we've created a very nice system that disperses it as well. Both in the cul-de-sac, in an infiltration basin, and multiple rain gardens, which I'll hit on.
Are you able to tell at night whether this parking lot design is going to result in headlights shining into the neighbors' properties?
Well, you can, just from a simple standpoint, you can see cars are pointed this way. They're pointed this way all the way down to here, and then they turn a little bit this way. Now, granted, for this space, even here, the spaces are pointed this way. And of course, we have screening, but it's like this little block of space is here. Okay, fair enough. These up here also, but there's a thick, vegetation there. Of course, that's,
What type of vegetation is that?
well, here, if you like, I can scroll back and,
Yeah, I'm sorry to make you jump.
not at all. This is only aimed at answering your questions, so fire away. Oops, except I need to go the right way. Okay, so that's the entrance. So that there is that's about the end of Winston Prouty Way. So Guilford Street's out this way. The school building's over here. Here is, and this is current. This is taken a few days ago. So of course it's more structure in the wintertime, than necessarily leafy vegetation. I'm not sure if I have one more after this. I don't know that I do.
But that's basically going to stay the same there, is what you're saying?
This is, Phil,
Yeah.
if anything,
And those top 3 spots will be roughly equal to the spots we see where you're pointing?
yes, yeah, that's right. There's a rain garden that goes here. And the challenge that they have is do no harm. Don't take out something that's good just to plant something else. So that's what you see in the landscaping plan is, endeavor to, and they show some more planting. It's pretty tight there already. As you go further this way, I don't think I have a perfect shot.
Could you go to the site plan?
That's good thinking.
So while you're looking for that, how many evening events currently take place at Winston Prouty?
Well, I guess I'd have to talk specifically with the school, but as a typical school, if there's, I know I've been there and they often run fairly late just in terms of the staff being there, as in 6 o'clock. Like I'm talking from my experience of just being at the site and so forth. Again, just in terms of what
I think you might have some,
Oh, Chloe.
Chloe Lear, the director of the Winston Prouty Center. I would estimate like one night a week. If there's a parenting class or board meeting or something like that, people are often there till 6, staff and such, but in terms of late night, I would estimate one night a week per month.
Thanks.
Because you're gonna have at least 3 rehearsals at night every week
Well,
with a lot of people. You have the choir, you have the chorus, you have the orchestra. And that's gonna be quite a few people driving in and out until till 9:30,
until 9.
3 nights a week.
In season, and their seasons overlap.
You need to
I'm
go to the
sorry.
mic and introduce yourself, please.
I'm Mary Green, I'm the director of the Brattleboro Music Center. In season, though the 3 performance groups do at times overlap on a given week, so that all 3 of them, yes, would be having rehearsals in the auditorium. But their schedules are variable enough that there's certain points at which none of them are rehearsing in a given month, or one of them, or 2 of them. So it's not, the worst case scenario for rehearsals would be 3 nights a week, yes. But I don't have it plotted out.
Right, although one of those typically is a weekend in the 5 to 7 range as opposed to, nighttime. I think the choir, or the chorale, right, also, typically.
The chorale rehearses at night right now.
On
On Sunday night, they rehearse from 7 to 9 or 9:30.
And rehearsal schedules do change, but yes, at this point, yes,
But,
they do. And Putney at this point too, as well.
Yeah,
So I think, go ahead.
I got another
Yeah.
quick question on parking, or a couple. It seems to me you're gonna have well over 300 people in the auditorium, or can have, at a time. And so 6 to 1,
I think it's 225 seats.
Yes.
but there's an orchestra too.
you have performance groups who will have various numbers of people who will be parking with their instruments and their music and music stands and whatever else they bring. and then you're gonna have an audience.
Well, I think we're limited to 225 seats. And for example, the orchestra plans no events there because they're too big. They want to go out to a church or to a gymnasium or to something like, maybe not bigger than a church, but to large venues. So they are rehearsal only.
And excuse me, John, when they rehearse,
Right.
it's rare that the entire orchestra is there together. In fact, they're kind of excited when they are all together at the very end, when they get close to performance. Typically, it's some portion of the orchestra that rehearses on that schedule, and that's down probably in the neighborhood of 50 people. And when they get to full cohort, that's within the dress rehearsals right before performances. Also, the concert choir does, if they're rehearsing, they're also not always at 90, right?
No.
And also, just in terms of the neighborhood, of course, this area sees, Guilford Street, sees a lot of traffic for, let's just back up. Again, just in terms of the feel of the area, certainly this is used as a connector to many different places, from coming from Route 9 and so forth. So in terms of traffic noise, coming up and down here, Guilford Street is a main road, is a significant highway, and sees a lot, and that is very much part of the character of the area as it is, including the events from the park and so forth. And so it's not necessarily that different to the extent that, which we believe we've succeeded at screening the effects of the actual cars parking. Also, the nature of the activity, is not, until they branch out, budding rock musicians that are, looking to hang out till late at the night and so forth. I mean, the very nature of what they're doing tends to be I guess I would say a more refined experience, perhaps.
No, my concern isn't the traffic necessarily, it's the headlights. And especially in winter, when all those deciduous trees will have no leaves, and the headlights are going to be facing toward the existing housing.
One strategy with the scheme we developed is we've essentially eliminated an east-west driving lane. So currently when cars, they use this, they park out back here in this dotted dirt lot. When every single one of them leaves, they drive east-west. All those headlights are shining into the backyards of the abutters here. And so what we tried to do is essentially, maintain this area. And so that exists. And then expand on that, but eliminate, by using the cul-de-sac this way, instead of trying to bring parking back here and have another east-west drive lane where every single car that would have to leave would be pointing directly to the abutters. We tried to bring them in, limit the headlights pointing into the properties by only the cars that are parked there. And as folks leave, the majority of these headlights they're blocked by the building this way. We tried to target the larger sort of plantings that currently exist, and then back to the status quo of what's existing to the north-south drive, and then exiting through Winston Prouty. And part of it is actually adding additional plantings to the northern end of the lot here as well to try to break that down more so than it currently is.
Right. So while we show 34 spaces, the spaces that with the direct impact or potential impact of headlights, where we're really driving directly into the vegetation, which is substantial. It is not, there's a lot there, and certainly they are looking to augment that as well, is really just these spaces here, which, yes, you'll have people walking, yes, you'll have cars parking down here. They come in, for a rehearsal, but in terms of sort of the magnitude, it's not that we have all 34 spaces lined right up, pointing this way. We work very hard to try and, one, break it up, and then as we get this way, try and get them pointed away, and use the low and thick planting to, again, shield the cars, but not give up that view of Wantasket on the other side.
When those westward facing spaces are plowed, is the snow pushed to the west?
There would be a little space there. I suspect the plow guy would probably, that'd be the logical place he'll push for it. There's a rain garden there. They'll probably push some in here, but I would think that they probably will come in and push it up.
There's really no other way to do it, right? Unless you bring in a bucket loader.
Yeah, or you could try and push it into the rain garden until that's full, but I would think likely. It comes in on an angle, plows it, and then squares up. And
Where will you push the snow from the cul-de-sac there?
again, to the outside, once you get around to this side, there's a great big spot. There's no problem. Or, again, if you come straight on down through here, this goes right into the cul-de-sac. This is actually a 4-bay, so it is a low spot. To the extent that they can sort of wing the first part of it, if they use an angling plow into there. Also, over here to the far end of the infiltration basin, can be pushed there. The truth is they can go all the way around the edges too. There's room there.
Is it going to roll down into or melt down into the whetstone?
Well, the whetstone curves away here, so here again on these well-drained gravelly soils, it would take an unusual event, for that to happen. But also just the way we have the site graded, it's going to, from the parking lot here, anything that goes in here in the 4-bay goes into our basin for infiltration. Anything that comes over here on this side, it goes directly into there. Anything from this pushed up against the bank here, you can see this drainage ditch, or this ditch is here. So drainage shoots off here and comes down like that. So if they put a big pile of snow up here, this is kind of the crest of the hill. Again, for that spot on those soils, likely it's going to melt slowly and just soak in. The soils will accept it.
And you're going to have details on that showing that it will accept it?
Well,
I'm concerned that that's going to be plowing off parking areas and is going to put snow and other things into the whetstone.
Well, of course, this portion of things is very much like the existing, and we capture all this. This is all graded into here, and this is a great big infiltration basin designed, just exactly for that. So there certainly is a lot of capacity here to accept that. The center is the ideal place, and that could become an operational agreement because it's a low spot, as a 4-bay there.
This is just my thinking, but unless plans are made for it, I wouldn't be particularly comfortable with a lot of snow plowed to the backside.
Right, well, actually, I think the plans pretty well address that, and that all this in the center, this entire area here.
So you would be
Capture.
comfortable saying no plowing to the backside, no snow to be plowed to the backside?
Well, the only issue with that is they have to plow this access to the back here, so for a fire lane. So that is a gravel lane with 2 strips of reinforced turf on each side, and as a large, well-drained, grassy area, it's ideal place to pile snow. Absolutely. The grades themselves, this right now is basically a flat area with, to ensure that, it would be a tiny change to create a berm right here, for example, to ensure that the snow melt just soaks right in. Very simple. It basically will do it as it sits, because it is, you saw the picture, here, I'll back up.
Yeah, I've been there many
Okay.
times. So.
That's exactly what we would want and expect to have happen, is for the snow to soak right in, into those soils, as they sit.
And the other thing that still have some concerns about is the traffic, more so than the headlights, because you got 34 spaces and chorus and guests come in to see a performance, all trying to get in and out of there. It seems like it could add quite a bit of congestion to the road at the times you're having the events.
Again, I guess my response to that would be that the group will be a knowledgeable group who will know the site, will know the space. If you're coming later to an event, are you going to just drive by a guaranteed parking spot at the Living Memorial Park? Or are you going to, how many times are you going to do this where you go around the loop and have to go back before you realize, I'll just park at the park? So that was part of the idea behind if we limit the parking, we limit the impact. And people adapt and find other ways, which they can do by the nature of their organizations, which they've been doing through their history. I got off on my, all good.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. So I think we were talking about traffic. And any other questions on traffic? Anything else?
No, but you would be willing to put a berm in
Absolutely.
down there?
It'd be extremely simple to do. Again, what we would be maintaining, we wouldn't be rechanging the flow. All we'd be doing is guarantee 1 or 2 foot, berm for snow storage. Done. And we wouldn't. Again, it would be just a very simple infiltration area. It wouldn't necessarily need to be designed as accepting flow, because it receives no flow from rainwater other than what rains on it. It's only that question of in the event that it's melting and then there's a spring storm or something like that. That's when it might actually do something, type thing.
Is whomever's responsible for doing the stormwater and runoff calculation capable of making a statement as to whether that can take a big pile of snow on it as it currently sits?
First of all, that's me. And it is absolutely capable of taking a big pile of snow. The engineer in me always tries to answer that to 100.0%.
I mean, using the same standard you use when you determine that there's no net increase in runoff.
Right, which is, well, we'll get to talk about that, but this portion's, designed, with a model and so forth. There isn't necessarily a model I can reach to for stormwater, for snow. But, yes, I mean, I'm comfortable with a large pile of snow there that it would soak in. Can I guarantee under every possible scenario that it would not? No.
And with the berm, it would never do it?
It would be a very extraordinary event if ever that happened. Again, it's just practically speaking. It's the highest point on gravelly soils. All you'd be looking to do is not have a short circuit.
I don't want to belabor this. I'm sorry. I'll let you move forward. I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So parking. And loading. Okay, so pedestrian access and circulation, I think we probably covered that in terms of the sidewalk, which again, this includes the sidewalk and so forth. Landscaping and screening, we did touch on that some. Phil, do you have any more points you want to make on landscaping and screening?
Not unless there's specific questions on species or...
Is the stuff that you're adding on the western edge near the deciduous things that Ms. Hasegawa was concerned about, is it also deciduous?
Let's get to some visual aid. There we go.
I think the picture, I thought you were on the picture, a giant caterpillar there.
So that, by the way, is the top of that knob.
Right.
So there's kind of the two levels. On the shrubbery level, it's looking at it, it's a mix of Douglas arborvitae, native mountain laurel, and then there's a mix of trees that'll go into this section, which is primarily going to be, let's see, white spruce and red maple.
So, forgive me, I know arborvitae's an evergreen, but is the mountain laurel as well?
Mountain laurel is,
No, I don't think it is.
yeah,
But the spruce is,
the spruce is.
All right.
so it's a mix.
A lot of public opinion on that one. I wish I had guessed.
I can look it up on my
No, I
phone.
hate to hear those rumors.
I apologize, the
No, that's
landscape
all-
part
that's all right.
isn't.
It's fine. Let's move on.
Okay, so that was landscaping and screening. Okay, stormwater and snow storage, we touched on that, but let me just kind of give you the more official version. This is a combination of treatment techniques. This whole side, all our new impervious up through here, all drains to this infiltration basin. And that's done in accordance with the Vermont Stormwater Manual. Test bits, perk tests, sizing, so forth. 4 bay here, 4 bay there. Again, all aimed at this piece of it. Over on this side, again, the design standard was both the low impact design manual, per the zoning, which that's where we get these rain gardens here, and rain gardens here, and so forth. So those are my standards that I was using in that, and that it's problematic in terms of definitions of if you start trying to describe in terms of specific storm events or flows, like I often do for the state. What that is that's more of a recipe approach. It's designed to be fairly simple. Inflow area of like a 10% correlation. So rain garden, at least 10% of my inflow area. And then again, prescriptive right out of their manual for the number of plantings and depth of soil and so forth. So flow is, again, down here, flow to the cul-de-sac is into the cul-de-sac here, into there. And infiltration basin, any large storm events that do fill this up would then overflow. There's an existing channel right here. And this is, again, per the zoning, matches what the site does right now, because this is the low spot. And right now you're parking up here, and it flows over this way, it flows this way, and it kind of works its all its way down to here. And it's unusual that you see much runoff, again, just because of the nicely drained soil. So what we've done is create a little more volume over here to make that happen. Okay, so that's stormwater. Under renewable energy resources, proposed development will not interfere with the use or access to renewable energy resources on adjacent properties. And I think we're squarely comfortable saying that we're going to have no impact on adjacent properties. Under energy conservation, it is designed to minimize its energy use. Energy saving approaches to development may include high efficiency buildings, which maybe you can say a word or two just about the building.
Again, going back to the HVA systems we're looking at, they're very high performance. We'll consult with our engineers as well as the Vermont. I'm blanking on the Efficiency Vermont to find the best system for the space. And then additionally, the construction itself, fortunately, sort of thermal transmission and sound transmission is very similar. So we'll be trying to decouple, interior structures from exterior structures so that
There's no thermal lag into the space, which also results in no sound transmission out of the space as well, which just helps. The systems will work a lot less than they would in a traditional building.
Right, so truly carefully designed for energy efficiency. Exterior lighting, which again, we talked about that. We talked about the lighting plan. Back. Oops.
I don't think we have to go through that again.
Okay, I don't want to torture you. I know I'm.
Support one step.
Okay. All right. So again, designed 12-foot poles, low full cutoff LEDs. With going to, other than a few spots where it's 1 foot candle, 0 at the property line.
0.1.
Or a few places where it's 0.1. Yeah. Okay.
Is your plan to have those on all the time?
No.
Yeah, no, in that, again, they pay the electric bill. And we've talked about that. Like they have right now, there is one light there. There's some lights, I think, on the building that are on right now. And, part of their, again, from our conversations would be to have a timer of some sort so that the bulk of them can be turned off just so they don't, there's no reason to light the entire parking lot.
And there is, just to the right of this picture, there is an existing street pole mounted light, and that is anticipated on staying. And that's...
Right, so an existing
Yeah.
town, right, okay. Signs, at this time we don't have any signs proposed with this project. Performance standards, again, I think the primary, well, the two was both light and sound, which I think we've addressed those, that we won't have an impact at the property line. Educational services, again, this is existing members of the community. They'll be redirected to this, but will not impact educational services. We'll only enhance it with, a truly fine, resource for the town, for musical education. Municipal services, again, no unreasonable burden on the town, and no significant change from those that are now. And cumulative impact, development will not contribute excessively or unreasonably to cumulative impacts within the area or town that would limit, impair, or preclude the future use of the property for uses allowed under these regulations. No, we think it will be only an enhancement, both for the community and for a part of town that already has any number of large events at the park, and is very much part of the fabric of the town from the people that are already involved with the BMC. And then I guess lastly, municipal plan and laws, again, we're, as we've presented, in compliance with municipal plan and laws. And those are the site plan and conditional use criteria. Previously, from the sketch plan review, there are 2 waivers associated with this, which were concurred with, I believe would be maybe the term from the sketch plan review. The 10% increase in the base building, and the or is that the accessory roofs?
The accessory is 10%.
Okay, and then the base building was 25%.
Yes.
Okay, which are in the record, but just to summarize the items that we are here tonight requesting: site plan, conditional use review, and those waivers.
Well, if the board is okay with it, there's so many people here who've been sitting patiently, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Okay, members of the public, this is your chance. I'm sure you're not all here to sit quietly. If you could just approach the microphone, say who you are, what your relationship is to the applicant, we're liberal about letting everybody talk, but for legal reasons, you have to sort of explain it so that we understand why you're an interested person. And then you can say whatever you want. We'd only ask that you direct your comments to the board, and we'll let the applicant respond to what you say, and we might follow up, and we'll offer you a chance to speak again if you wish. Our general rule of good manners is that everybody gets to speak once before people come back up, but we'll entertain as much as you have. So, who's the first brave soul? Go ahead. If you could just go to the microphone. It's not amplifying you, but it's so that you can be heard on cable access.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Brewer, and I am a middle abutter, right in the middle of all the activity.
Right here, I think.
And we are, my wife and I are excited about the music. Regardless of how this makes it to the end, there's going to be some change. Not only in the back of our house, we've been there 20 years, and we've been looking at Wantastic for quite a few years. But the amount of the change in front of the house and back of the house with traffic, just with small fry, I noticed that cars are parking all the way down almost to the current rec parking now on the side, right down past the ball field, and this is the first time I've noticed that heavy use. One of the things that I was concerned about is obviously the lighting. If everybody's coming in and if they had all drive a Prius, that would be awesome, because that would, but we are west and coming in, and I'm wondering, how quickly you anticipate things that will filter out headlights that everybody's turning on at the same time, or staggering, and then coming around the kiosk or the turnaround and coming back that way, with sort of a secondary turn back with the lights going back that other way.
Before they respond, can I ask you a quick question about that, Mr. Brewer?
Yeah.
How is the current greenery as far as screening?
We have none at our property line.
Oh, you're north of it?
Well,
Yeah, this is open right here.
yeah,
Right now,
the
there's
picture-
no,
Yeah, we are south of it. The
there's
picture
no-
that they have is in front of the Henry's house, which they've built that up, but
Okay.
we don't want to be boxed in and feel like we're, have this row of hedges, or trees that kind of fill in, but we like a little bit of planning accordingly. But it sounds like it's been addressed in some of the material, or the species, the kind of plants you.
Can you put up the planting plan and show what's going to be there at that particular point where his yeah, that one.
So it's hard to see. I think your property opens as the opening towards the back here.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that's the area here where I think Austine was at the neighborhood meeting. He's works at Scott Simons and is a registered landscape architect, and these have been moved and adjusted from those comments to the best he felt suited. And what those plantings are currently is
Are they going to be above headlight level, and are they going to be thick, and are they going to be evergreens?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, something with a good mix. I love evergreens, but a whole tree or a whole line of them would really
Yeah, I think
feel like.
a strategy we are certainly supportive of is not making hedgerows.
Right.
And so it'll be
Symmetrical.
Yeah, it'll be asymmetrical. It'll be a mix of the Douglas arborvitae and the native mountain laurel, and then there's also inkberry, which is a lower lying shrub mixed in with all of that. And that was his direction to, not blocking that view. Spread the taller trees that are gonna fill in and out outwards
beyond the sort of sight lines towards the hill in the background.
And just the last question, that we are the lowest spot, so that would, I was listening to the plowing, and that may be close to the end of, or the southern end of our property, but I don't know who's gonna plow, but it seemed like we are one of the low spots where if there are a number of storms, back to back, we could see some high piles.
Oh, visually. I was all ready to address runoff, and, that's my bread and butter. Fair enough, that if they did pile a big pile of snow here, although, again, plow guy, loads up his plow coming all the way through here, it's going to be easy to just drop that right in the center of the cul-de-sac. Now granted, it would be a pile there too, but we'll have a lot of places, you can put it, could put some here, as he comes around here, this is going to end up over here, and so forth. And also, just in a general statement, in all these things, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a group more willing to listen and work both screening, operationally, and so forth, than the BMC. They very much, approach us as we're entering a new part of the community and wish to be a good neighbor, and there's a lot goes a long ways toward solving a lot of problems that can be big or small if you just talk.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, just the impact of cars to car doors opening and closing, and the human traffic. I mean, we do our best, but it is going to change. We're excited about the music, that's for sure. But the amount of people that are coming and going, and just our normal volume of, I'm concerned.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just so that those who can't be here can hear.
Hi, my name is Wendy Levy. I'm a member of the press. I wanted to identify myself as such, but I'm also here as a neighbor. I live near to the proposed site, and my concerns are with construction. Is this the appropriate time to ask construction questions?
Yes, can you just say where you live?
I'd rather not, because of a member of the
Oh, okay,
press.
that's fine.
I'd rather not, have the public not know exactly where I live. I live on Guilford Street, and I can tell you.
That's more than enough.
Okay, thank you. So, during construction, what are the hours that construction is going to happen?
I think typical would be like a 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. But then again, lots of construction projects are limited. But they don't want to stretch it out. They don't want it to go on any longer than. But that's probably a typical 7 to 6. Something.
Okay, I was wondering if there were any ordinances from the town about when construction is allowed to happen.
They are, but they're outside of our jurisdiction.
Okay.
So when we give them a permit, it has to do with how their design deals with things that, for the most part, either affect the public or their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And while construction does that, who would get involved if they were pile driving at midnight? I mean, we don't write that into a permit because we don't have a say in how it's built. It's
Okay.
just the design that we review, but in the plan.
Well, before the evening's over, somebody can tell me who those concerns.
It could either be addressed to me or to the police.
Okay, great, thank you. And my other question is about debris. So what I've noticed since moving into that area is it's a pretty high wind corridor. How will debris from construction be maintained so it doesn't end up in my yard?
Oh, well, very much the contractor's obligation that they run a tight, construction plan. There are, we will define the limits of disturbance, and that would be, likely written into the contract for the contractor, because ultimately, if it becomes the BMC's lot, then they're responsible for whatever the contractor is doing on their lot. And so if you're not happy with something, then they're definitely not happy with their contractor. So.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
I
I'm Ellen Martin, and I'm a longtime member of the concert choir and work with the Music Center on fundraising. I just wanted to address two things. One, I live next door to Oak Grove School, which is where the Wyndham Orchestra currently rehearses, and like you guys, I'm used to having music in the neighborhood. I just want to say for the record that I've never been disturbed by them coming or going.
The traffic, you mean?
The traffic or the sound or the slamming doors or whatever, so that's been a nice thing. So the other piece is that as a member of the concert choir, and we've been rehearsing at the River Garden for several years now, that as a group, we're used to parking away from where we rehearse. And when we've had events where we are presenting, Susan Diddell, the director, has requested that we park further away, and people that have infirmities or trouble have parked closer by. But my suspicion would be, and I'm just speaking from my own perspective, that if neighbors are concerned with a lot of cars coming on rehearsal nights for the larger group, which would be the concert choir, that if we work to park at the rec department at the Living Memorial Park, that probably wouldn't be a problem for most of the people that are in attendance. We're pretty able-bodied for a group. That's
Right.
certainly the other people would be parking closer.
How many spaces are there in that rec department lot? I apologize if you said before.
I don't recall if it was in the application, but there are approximately 71, counting
Okay.
from an aerial photo.
Okay.
The other thing
Now,
I'm sorry.
but just 71 in the lower, and then there are upper lots that have more
Right.
too. So.
And the other thing that often happens with concert choir rehearsals is that there's groups of people carpool right now. Like there's a group of
Right.
kids from 5 a.m. from South and the Fame, so we're trying to be an ecological group as well as a musical.
Could you estimate how many cars there are at an average chorale practice?
Yes.
Yeah, the corral is smaller. I'm in the choir.
I'm sorry, concert
About 90
choir.
people right now.
And
I meant to ask you because you're in the big one. I just mixed up the names.
Yeah, no,
Pardon
that's
me.
okay.
we did it
Yeah.
we didn't ask 50 was the high end, 35.
Yeah, I think that's probably,
Okay.
and I'm just total speculating here.
No, that's okay. I mean, you've been there and I haven't, so you know more than we
Yeah,
did.
there are several carpools that come,
Okay.
and not everybody shows up every week either.
But about 50 sounds at least not very inaccurate.
50 sounds like a decent number to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I'm Joe Madison. I'm a board member with the BMC, and I sing in the concert choir as well. And I'm very excited about this opportunity for the BMC that's been looking for a new home for now many years and have been surviving in the old convent. So this is very exciting for music education in our area. And I just want to put that in. Very much appreciate the Brewers hosting an event where we had a chance to talk to them and some of their neighbors about some of the concerns. And I think the only couple of comments I want to make, just to make sure, perception. Obviously, there'll be more traffic, more cars in the area. There still are only 34 parking spaces, so the number of cars flowing through that site on a given night or for an event would still be relatively, obviously some people might come and drop off and drive out, but for the most part, people coming to park are not going to all come there first. It'll be a relatively small number. Mount Laurel is in evergreen. It does stay green all winter long, just as a shrub. But anyway, I think this is a very exciting project, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Appreciate your help on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Madison. Anybody else?
Nothing more on Mount Laurel.
This is the first time I've ever been in a room with two different lawyers and nobody talked. I can say that. It's okay. Well, if there's no further commentary from the public, is there anything that was raised in the public comments that the applicants wish to speak to beyond what you've already gone over?
Only to reinforce, I guess, that the BMC sees it as an obligation to, continue to be a good neighbor and to reach out, just as they've started at the beginning of this project, and I know that is their intent, very much so. Just by the nature of what they do, it only makes sense.
Do any members of the board have additional questions in light of what the public discussed?
No.
Okay. I've missed something.
I'm not sure to what degree we can accommodate the request to allow the entire riparian buffer area remain in lawn. The language is quite restrictive, so I think that's something we'll have to work with them.
And maybe you can correct, I meant to grab you before this, but if I can just respond to that with a question, or this comes from section 334E under previously developed sites. And you can stop me when I'm reading something that doesn't apply. On previously developed residential lots, which I guess ours is not residential, so that would not apply. So that maybe that kills it right there. Naturally, woody vegetation will not have to be reestablished on area within the riparian setback maintained as lawns or gardens.
So what you can do is you can have up to 800 square feet or 20% of the riparian setback as lawn. There's probably, you could also try other types of vegetation, but it's something we're going to have to sit down and try. And
at the end of the day, that the BMC can work with that. I mean, looking at the site, it made sense to not enclose. It has a very nice open area feel to it, and for both aesthetics and for the site itself. So that's where they're coming from on that issue. And that it seemed like a shame, if we couldn't find a way. But regardless, they completely are willing to.
I think there are planting schemes that will be able to achieve that and meet the needs of
maybe some sort of low.
Yeah, like low bush blueberries would do it or something like that.
But we can't waive that, right?
I don't see.
What? You were just reading from 334E?
Yes, I mean, other than the fact that it's talking about previously developed sites. That number 4 under 334E is related to residential lots. So it's apparently available to residential lots that you wouldn't necessarily have to revegetate that area. But of course, we're not strictly we're not residential. I mean, I guess the other comment on that issue is we're not proposing anything for the riparian area. We consciously stayed out of the entire 50-foot area, so our project is not developing or going there.
I'm not ignoring you, I'm just looking something up, I'm sorry. I would like to look at these on my phone because I can search for words. I'm not texting them. Brian, is it conclusive that this could not be considered residential?
Yeah, I think, definitely not.
Yeah, it says it can't be expanded. It says it can't be expanded, and they're not expanding.
Yeah, 3 talks about pre-existing development must not be expanded into the riparian setback, except in accordance with subsection 334D.
Brian, it also says that the pre-existing development may continue as long as they don't expand into it. Does that mean we can give them a waiver?
I think that's really for buildings.
Oh, for
And that,
buildings.
yeah, and that wouldn't be a waiver either, that would just be...
But you can maintain some of it as lawn. It's just more limited.
The lawn goes all the way up to the edge.
It does right now, yes.
And there's no tree along the whole line?
Oops. Oh, okay. I'm getting tired. I'm starting to press the wrong buttons.
No, I apologize.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
But if you called it the coast, there's no tree on that whole coast?
No, No, there's a fence. Basically, it's because, of course, it currently functions as the limit for where kids can go to. So it's maintained, and of course, with, things like Lyme disease and tick habitat is a no-no for, with young, kids standing around. So.
And with musicians.
But that's existing. There's some leaves over there against the fence, but there are no significant trees of any sort. It's maintained as long. Now, I guess another point on this, of course, that is strictly speaking, but of course, the actual horizontal distance from the stream is actually quite a distance because the whetstone is approximately 75 feet lower. So, per our requirement, the top of the bank, you follow that steep bank up until at whatever distance. I mean, it could be 1,000 feet away if that bank was tall enough. In our case, maybe it's 100 or 150 feet, but our actual horizontal distance is significant. It just happens to be on a slope.
Brian, what do you think? I mean, the two provisions don't really make sense in light of the fact that we can allow them to remove it, to me, under 334E4 or 330. Sorry, under 334D5.
The BMC certainly appreciates you making the effort to look at this closely.
Well, I mean, we're dealing with a whole new set of zoning ordinances, and your application is, I think, the first one to implicate this rule, which didn't exist before. Of course, we hadn't had Irene before either, so we're forced.
Yeah.
We're all working within something that we're not completely comfortable, or at least I'm not completely comfortable. I just want to make sure we're considering this, and I like to have Brian here because he actually knows the answers to most of the questions.
Except he doesn't.
Are you following what I'm saying at least?
Yeah, what I'm thinking is that, as it would be a conditional use approval, it's probably worthwhile to just rewarn that narrow section of the application and let
Right.
the board consider just the issue of riparian buffer entirely separate from the rest of the project. So what it's talking about is there has to be some reasonable explanation for why you want to have additional clearance, and you have to maintain the function. So I think the argument you're making, where there's already considerable vertical separation and there's a public health aspect as well, would probably be a good basis for making your request.
Just fundamentally, I can't see how we don't have jurisdiction to waive it, but if there were trees already there, would have jurisdiction to authorize them to remove the trees.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, one of the challenges with new ordinances is they don't really get tested, unfortunately, until we actually have to apply them. And that's something we're trying to do. But you understand Brian's suggestion here?
Yes.
More or less kick that can so we can deal with the specific issue rather than have to have your whole application tied to it.
Right. I think the BMC is agreeable with that.
Would you want them to withdraw that request now so they don't have to deal with a ruling on it until they can just have the narrow application separately? Is that procedurally probably the most efficient way to go?
Why don't we just make a finding of the decision that the riparian buffer planting is being deferred to a future hearing?
Okay. 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 So, the things that I had written down are that there should be some formalized arrangement with the Parks and Recreation Department, and we'll defer this issue. Other than that, I didn't have any suggestions for conditions beyond those suggested by Brian on page 7, which are pretty lengthy. And you guys went through those, you don't have an objection to
The
that?
only one we had an objection to was the buffer question.
Right, right. And that's going to be amended to the can kicking solution.
There was the berm.
Oh, the berm. The
Yeah.
berm, feel the berm. You're content to just, I mean, personally, if you tell me that the water will drain from the snow, that's enough for me, but I don't think the rest of the board's satisfied with that. Are you content to just say put berm in there?
Yeah, that entire area, and first of all, yes, berm is not it's very easy.
We don't have to get deeper into it. If you're content that the berm is there, my reading of the other members of the board is that they'll be happy with that, right?
I mean, so a berm that prohibits runoff from a snow melt pile from flowing down the bank. And what I would still like it to do is to have it open toward the, or which way I'm going here.
And I mean, you're being an engineer who's competent to tell our zoning administrator, yes, this berm is going to do this.
Yes, exactly right. So all we would do is just ensure that there's a berm on this side of things, so that way we get good, if ever it does fill up, and if ever it does flow, first we'll have a big area where it would just sit there and infiltrate, and then if it can flow, then it has this great big wide flat area, which we're using for the stormwater treatment for coming off this road anyway. The ideal scenario, send it over a wide flat grassed area. So we'll put those together, and absolutely it's and entirely easy to do. Very.
There was one other thing in here that you didn't talk about, which is these level 2 car chargers. Is that fine? Did you not bring it up because that's something that you're prepared to do? I noticed it wasn't in the plan.
Maybe you could direct my attention to which number that was.
Number 10. Are we reading two different things?
I think we're reading the staff
Oh,
memo.
you're reading the staff memo, okay. Have they seen your draft? So when let me give you just 1 second. When I said we would include the other conditions, what Brian has done in our draft decision, if you go to page 7, is he's incorporated the suggestions of the fire department. And there's some general language things in there. You need to get your state permits, which I'm sure you already know. And they all looked fairly perfunctory except for that number 10, which I don't think you're required to do yet.
Yep.
They need to do the conduit, is that the deal?
No, this is actually a worse situation. Given the actual amount of parking that would be required if they did that maximum, they would be required to have a couple of chargers.
Oh, okay.
The standard is that if you have 40 spaces, then you have to start providing them. But in this case, it's being... The plan requires enough spaces to trigger it.
Okay.
Many spaces aren't being built. So it's really...
So it sounds like you may not have a choice.
Just from a global perspective, would it make any more sense on installing those in the recreation lots so they're available to more users?
Yeah, if recreation was open to that, yeah, would be.
Yeah, if we're counting those spaces for the purpose of triggering this requirement, I can't see how we could say you couldn't do that, frankly. And my guess is it would probably be something that the Parks and Rec committee would be thrilled about.
Yeah, I think that'd be in our discussion, whether my question was so the parking on BMC right now is technically less than required for the need to have the electric vehicle charging, but because we are counting on the spots that the recreation department bought, that brings us above.
Although does it though, because our minimum for our number of seats is actually 38.
So we're below the 40.
Just for the 225 seats in the auditorium divided by 6.
Yeah, there's additional requirements for the classroom building, and basically he said we shouldn't do addition because it's overshadowed by the larger demand, and given that they're not taking place at the same time, we both thought that was appropriate.
Yeah, and again, if it's a requirement, the BMC is all about following the rules, but then again, they have to fundraise to build their project. So if it's not a hard and fast requirement, then they would at least like the option.
It's not black or white. I mean, it's one of those sword and the shield kind of things where if you only had 38 spaces, we would be very concerned about 200 people. The fact of that overflow parking existing lessens our concern about the capacity of this project to handle a large chorale practice or orchestra practice. However, the other side of that coin is someone could say, who is interested in enforcing this regulation, would say, well, you're really letting them have the equivalent of almost 110 spots without following the law.
Occasionally during the year, we'll have the equivalent of 110 spots, but if that's the expectation, we will certainly abide by it.
Generally, when Brian tells me that that's the expectation, I listen to him. The times I haven't, I've been wrong. Do you guys have any opinion on this?
No, I do know that some people drive electric cars or, Priuses and Volts and whatever. And they probably appreciate the chance to plug in while they're rehearsing.
You could contact Tesla, they got plenty of them over there. How many people are driving Tesla? And I think they're probably open to those suggestions.
I've never seen anybody park.
I did see somebody once.
Yeah,
I did.
Once.
Yeah.
Probably the same day. All right, so
How long does it take to charge one of those cars, do you know?
the Tesla? I think
Tesla?
I think the
It's
test.
hours, right? It's not-
Well, you can do a quick charge. You get like 70% in an hour. If they have super high
In
power.
the meantime, there are no other lights on anywhere.
I did not make this rule. I don't really have a huge interest in enforcing it, but we are supposed to enforce all the rules. So
Like, is there any sort of terminology of permanent versus temporary parking? Because I guess it is an interesting point that, understanding that if you have so many permanent spaces, people will permanently use them to charge their cars. If you have overflow parking that is temporary, that, at a certain event, does that then require the permanent spaces to have charged cars?
Yeah, valid point, as opposed to going to work and your car's going to sit there all day.
right.
Going to get used. It would be a shame to build something that didn't get used, I guess would be the root of the comment. But
You see a way out?
Well, I think ultimately, just having two chargers for 34 spaces is going to, that's just a kind of opening bid, and, eventually you'll have at least 10% or so of your spaces with chargers. You're just getting a little bit ahead of the curve.
I mean, we're running into a situation where the law is trying to anticipate the future.
Yes.
I don't think you can expect to have a perfect setup every time. However, I think there's a consensus on the board that we're supposed to impose this on you, frankly. Sorry.
Although, if you want flexibility to see if they can put the charger in the recreation space instead.
Oh yeah, that would clearly make a lot more sense. I agree with that.
Build that, that's certainly.
I agree with that. We don't have the jurisdiction to tell you where to put them, but. I mean, do we? I guess it could relate to traffic flow, but that's a hard sell.
I think that's fine to
Yeah.
give them that flexibility.
But I do think we probably want to discuss that with the BMC further.
Yeah, I think it's,
Yeah.
if we know what we're required to do, we will figure out the way.
And they could come back and ask for a modification of the permit and make that legal argument later if it really was a huge deal, right? Yeah, so, I mean, this is not the end of this decision forever. If you come back to us and say, well, we have this good legal authority that everybody on the board and Brian are all wrong about this, we'll consider that. So, my proposal, did you have a chance to look through the other proposed?
Yes, I didn't see anything objectionable. in that.
Okay. I don't mean to spring that on you at the end there, but, so, if we could have a motion then to approve application 2016-58, incorporating the proposed conditions in the draft order, in addition to a berm sufficient to prevent runoff into the whetstone, as discussed earlier.
Snow melt runoff would probably be.
Snow melt runoff, sure. To change the issue with the riparian buffer to provide that it be deferred, and to require an agreement with the Parks and Rec Department for shared parking. I think that's appropriate.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, you made it with 4 votes. Congratulations. And thank you all for coming. It's very helpful for us to have people here. Okay, it's 9:12 p.m. We just took a 5-minute recess. We're back on the record with application 2016-57, Henry Taggard. So who's going to be Henry Taggard tonight?
So, John Fidel from SVE Associates, presenting Henry Taggard's plan for sketch plan review. And hopefully a good deal more simple. I think you all have a copy of this plan. I'm trying to position it so all can see.
We do.
It's the camera that needs to see.
Right, exactly. So if you've got it, then we'll go with this. And again, I'm here as the first step in a subdivision process for sketch plan review to determine if it's a minor or major subdivision. The nature of the project is a 3-lot subdivision, taking the existing 8-acre lot and then creating a 1.5 acre lot parcels, basically in full compliance with the zoning ordinance. With one item which I should point out on the application is that there is a typo on the frontage that is listed on the application, and that it's listed as 72 feet, but it's actually 872 feet, which, reviewing the plan, you would wonder where 72 feet comes from. And then the proposed access for the lots is, via 50-foot wide right-of-way, as allowed, by the ordinance. And then just perhaps another note or two, not to make it overly complicated, is this does need to comply with the rural subdivision requirements. And that was part of the preliminary process, considering where there are prime soils. There are no prime soils, there are statewide soils. Also configuring...
There are what soils?
Statewide soils, which are...
Means non-agricultural, I think?
Oh, no. For the purposes of Act 250, prime is the best. Statewide still requires consideration, and then others, and not prime or statewide.
Okay.
It's the basic categories.
Okay.
But again, the way this lot needed to be laid out to address the requirements in the rural subdivision section of the zoning effectively calls for you to look at how you're configuring this so you don't plant houses on top of the best soils. And similarly, to not create or change the layout of a lot such that the remaining section, this over here, the remaining 5 acres, would not function still as a rural or more farm-like enterprise, which to the extent that we're able to do that, that was the intent behind this, putting the 2 lots for residential lots on the side, tucked over to one side to try and keep as much contiguous as possible. And of course, this is not, there's no use or change in use or anything else presented with this. This is strictly a residential 3-lot subdivision sketch plan review, and that's that.
Did you see the comments from the town planning office?
I did not.
Can we get him an extra? I think I see one.
I've got one right here with you.
I would give you mine, but it's highlighted and I want to use those.
Were these sent out or emailed out, or were these?
These were emailed
I thought I had
yesterday?
emailed them too, John. I'm sorry, I must have not attached it.
I think they came out yesterday.
Friday.
Right, yeah, I
Yeah,
got mine
Friday.
Friday.
What was it, Friday? See, that's how you know I had a good weekend. I think Friday was yesterday. I mean, the thing that I noted particularly was that essentially they wanted to confirm that you're not attempting to request any waivers here and realize that you'd have to repeat the sketch plan review to do so.
That's correct, and we're not requesting any waivers.
Okay. And the second is the issue of the site analysis that they raised. And I don't know, has there been a site analysis on an application I conflicted out of?
Pardon me?
Has there been a site analysis on an application I conflicted out of? Because I don't remember seeing one at all.
Oh, there hasn't been one yet.
So, you're the first person to represent an applicant who's subject to this requirement under 344E that is new. And it requires you to submit this site analysis. Now, we have never seen a site analysis. But if you go to 344E, it sets forth each of the things that the analysis is supposed to do. And it seems to me that the representative, the applicant here tonight would be qualified to do this, right?
Sure.
So,
Just to clarify, is the site analysis a requirement for sketch plan review?
No.
It's a requirement for the actual, once you've determined whether it's a minor or major.
yeah,
I mean, I can still speak to that because we have done that sort of initial work. Of course, now I'm actually representing the engineer that, laid this out, Peter Bomick, who is very familiar with the site and so forth. But to the extent that, as I was mentioning in my first remarks, we recognize this is a rural subdivision. We recognize that there are new requirements that cause you to need to look at what your soils are, need to look at trying to lay this out in such a way that you still try and maintain a, again, subject, as feasible with your project, a contiguous parcel, suitable for, a parcel.
we just wanted to make sure that you have that in mind so that when you do come here, we don't say, where is this thing?
Got it.
And we want you to be aware of the fact that you're the first one, and it's probably smart to either look to Brian for some guidance or take a careful look at the new zoning regulations, because you'll be doing it the same way we are. So if you can explain to us why you're doing it a certain way, that would be helpful. Brian, what's the reminder on the second page? This must comply with 312F. Does that just mean he needs a recorded document, a recorded easement? I can't remember what 312F is. Oh, okay. It's the driveway standards. And that's the other thing, when you come for your final plan review, you should be ready to have, or Peter, somebody should be ready to have for the board.
Right.
Anything else from the rest of the board?
The only other thing is that doing these conservation subdivisions, you don't have to have the same size lots. You don't have to have 1.5 acre lots. You can go with the smaller lot as long as the development density is conserved.
I think Mr. Taggard is comfortable with this as a concept, but good to know for maybe flexibility.
Yeah, and the parcel is actually big enough to yield, I think, 11 lots in total, so he could go for more.
But they'd have to be grouped in a small area.
Yeah,
If he wanted to take advantage of the higher numerical grouping possibility, they'd have to be stuck in the corner, probably, right? Well, maybe not a corner, but they'd have to be stuck in a small little development on there. But the style of this subdivision is reminiscent of the style that they were looking to evolve from when they redid these zoning ordinances. And this comports with the law as it is now. We just, if he wants to make this maximize the use of the lot, or the ability to sell lots and keep his own, it may be something you guys want to consider.
Yeah, I don't think he's looking to create a whole lot of little lots or a whole lot of. I don't think he would want to have that impact on the area.
The area in the front, to the right of the existing driveway, he's going to keep that, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Anything else from the board? I assume the members of the public don't have anything to say about this. Okay. Brian, is there anything that could be helpful here that we're not suggesting?
I think we should just note in the minutes that the board review the site plan, it comports with requirements, and the parcel can be subdivided.
Okay.
I think that's what Mr. Taggard was aiming for at this stage.
Yes, that's right.
Well, when you find the guy that does the minutes, can you make sure he does that? Okay. So this is still weird for me, but we don't vote on this, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so.
There's a determination about a minor or major as part of that
Oh,
subdivision?
We just do that administratively.
Oh, okay.
So in some ways it's a major one because you're accessing more than 3 parcels off the driveway. It would actually have to be a laneway.
Yeah, in here, in some, one of these, I think it was actually on one of the forms itself, I think it was on the application form, said typically subdivisions with less than 4 lots are minor subdivisions.
Yeah, it's that or whether you have to do a new roadway. And again, if you have 3 access off one driveway, it's considered a minor road. So, but it doesn't really complicate the review process very much.
if he can convince you, otherwise we're out of this decision, right? Unless there's an appeal.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Be convincing.
Well, I mean, there's not too many moving levers here. I mean, we have an 8 acre lot, we have 2 1.5 acre lots and a pretty much standard 50-foot right of way. It's, to my mind, kind of right down the middle of a typical.
My gut reaction was minor, but as I said earlier in the former hearing, my record against Brian is pretty bad, so.
I'm relying on the advice of one of my colleagues, but.
So he's just saying that to make me feel better. That's how bad my record is.
And
Okay.
again, those are the points I just wanted to make, is that on that issue, and again, that it, to our mind, it was a fairly straightforward application, but again, the process, needs to move forward as it's supposed to.
And you can always appeal. Okay, unless you have further questions for us, we're happy to entertain your questions, but
No, that's all I have.
okay.
That's all I have for you on.
In that case, we'll move on to our next application, which is Attorney Dunne, 2016-61 for Winston Prouty Center. Mr. Annis, it was good to see you.
Come on, Eric.
I sent to you on March, I just gotta find the date of when I sent it. It was March or April.
We just sit here, right? Are you gonna present something? Are you gonna stand up and present for this?
If you're,
Then I'll stay.
are you guys using that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the plan.
Okay.
Using it, literally, going to the source.
I'll support the door over here. David Dunn, representing Winston Prouty. I'm going to give you copies,
Thank you.
8.5 by 11s, as a result of a little confusion on our part.
Thank you.
We're working on getting a larger blow-up of this. And the size of that may not be of much assistance given the relative size of the core campus of Austine as compared to the 177 plus or minus acres total. This is an application both for a master plan and for subdivision, which we would look at as being a major subdivision. And so trying to meet the criteria of both. The overall plan here is, since Winston Prouty has acquired the former Austine campus, we're looking eventually to subdivide so that we create condominium parcels. The different parcels will be the existing buildings on the campus, plus one additional condominium parcel where one of the current tenants, High Five Adventure Learning, plans to build a new facility. The draft master plan that was presented has some holes in it. One of those is the size of High Five's anticipated facility. They're still not sure it's going to be in the 10,000 to 12,000 square foot range. The planned unit development that existed or exists dealt specifically with the Austine campus. And so what we're going to be doing is reworking that so that we can use a number of multiple uses. Again, with the change in the regulations, we looked through the existing or the proposed uses in this area, and most of the approved uses are already, would be covered by the potential uses we have, with the exception of cemetery. We're not planning on that. We are planning, however, to limit the planned unit development to an area that will not include the Wheeler House, which is, if you're familiar with the campus, it's a greenhouse with direct access off of Maple Street, has its own parking, its own access. And the other parcel is what's referred to as the former president's house. That has access along the common drive and then along a private drive. The map that we provided, that we worked with SVE on, just draft lines for subdivisions of the specific parcels. That ended up to be about 1.7 acres, and reviewing the access provisions, it appears that we would look for a waiver for the access to that to be a 25-foot right-of-way. The existing actual driveway is about 18 to 20 feet. We could push the right-of-way down in this direction. On the upper side, there's an existing stone wall, so it's not practical to do that. But if we reduce it from 50 down to 25 as permitted as a conditional restriction, then the parcel that it accesses can't be more than, as I read it, 3 times the minimum acreage, which would be 0.5 acres. This is 1.7, so we'd be reducing that parcel a shade down to 1.5, and we wouldn't look for that limit to that waiver, not a waiver past that. The other waivers that we'd be looking at would be setback. We're trying to keep as much of the property within common area in the condominium. So that impacts the most on Vermont Hall. The lines will be relatively close to it. Holton Hall, the older building, we're looking at that being basically the island that it sits on, so we'd have setback issues there. And then the 2 existing dorms, we're trying again to keep those relatively footprint lots. We've had some second thoughts about that in talking about potential uses, and I'll go into the potential uses in a minute. That might include some type of residential or hotel or hostel situation, and if we did that, or possibly senior cooperative living, we may need to put an elevator in, and it appears that we might want to do that by an addition to the building rather than taking up square footage in between. So we'll probably increase those somewhat. The other things that we are considering, as you see, we have called this the future development parcel. This is about 30 acres. This has access along Maple Drive, or Maple Street rather. This large parcel here is a 47-acre parcel that includes the seasonal camps. This is the area that we've tentatively talked to High Five about purchasing. They are not sure if they want to purchase that all of that parcel. They may not need part of it over here. If we did that, we have this designated as conservation area, about 80 acres. We may come back with a proposal that we continue to have at least 80 acres of contiguous, but that must be in a shape like this, which would include, would allow us to increase the ability to have more developable land here. This parcel, as is the entire campus, is within New Market tax credits. BDCC has asked us to try to reserve that for possible future development. If there is future development here, topographically and access-wise, it would be coming off of Maple Street. There is one existing gravel drive off of there. If there was development there, we'd have to deal with the access and the traffic flow issues there, but that would be a
pointer? It's the yellow button.
I think I'm just about done with it until they start asking questions.
Fair enough.
I'll kill somebody with that pointer.
That's the area they just logged, right?
What's that?
You just logged that.
Yes, the area that was logged is off of that road. It was up in here. There's been some clear cutting up there. From the logging standpoint, we'd probably be put in within the conservation restrictions. We've been negotiating that with the town. We'd be a lot less aggressive than Austine was when they were strapped for cash near the end. The conservation area would include a pond in any event, and this is some wetlands area. To the extent that the boundaries of the conservation area versus the High Five parcel encroach on and an overlap with respect to the wetlands, we would include covenants that they would not be developing in there. The initial chore that we gave SVE was make the lines as straight as possible. That's cheaper. So we may be gerrymandering those a bit. High Five has their existing ropes course in this area, and so we make sure that stays within their parcel. You also see the colored lines on here are existing trails. We would keep, our plan is to keep the trails open to the public. In the conservation area, other than we're going to try to make sure that the conservation area does not include the ropes course, so that's clear. The only use that we have found other than the open trails with respect to the conservation area has been a portion of what's the disc golf course. We're still working out as to whether that's going to be continued use or not, compatible with High Five. And then there's a small area up here that's called Upland, which is where Hilltop Montessori, when they used to have their facility at Vermont Hall, they would use that once a year for an annual retreat. They still do, and our plan is to continue to allow them to do that. The trails are open to the general public. We'll be clearly marking them alcohol, smoke-free, drug-free zones. Dogs are supposed to be leashed. And again, we'll work through with the limitations that make sense for that use. The other waivers that we're asking for is there are a number of conditional uses in the planned unit, in the institutional plan unit, and we would be asking for virtually all of those. Those include the different types of residential uses, either hotels or duplexes, 3-family, 4-family. That would be, we'll be looking for that for Wheeler House, because that's in that area. That was most recently used as somewhat kind of a transitional housing for deaf students getting into the community. The building is a little tired at this point. It could be converted if we find an interested landlord or possibly Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust to 3 to 5 unit housing. The Vermont Hall, which is where Winston Prouty will be having their major, with their facility, also includes in the upper corner of that the kitchen, which we're asking for clarification on that we can develop that into a Vermont certified food preparation facility. We have Vermont Dinners, which is a cooperative effort with UVM Extension that has been using that as a pilot project for preparing local frozen dinners, and we'd like to have them continue to use that, but also have it available for other community groups that would be looking to use that.
I actually view that as a decrease in intensity from the perspective of the ordinances, frankly.
Because it did not appear in me looking through the existing issues whether any real study had ever been done or real documentation had been as to uses and parking. We did it, and that leads a little bit into parking. We did a brief look at the regulations, and the parking count on the campus right now is 160 spaces. If we were at near capacity on the different things that would be included within planned unit development, again, leaving out these 2 parcels, and also not dealing with High Five because they'll add their own parking. We came up with a number that could be as high as 190 to 200 spaces. Yeah. What we'd like to stick with our existing 160. If you are familiar with the campus, you know that this Croker is here, that's the gymnasium building, and that is currently being used for Inspire School for Autism and the Garland School. That and combined with Winston Prouty will have uses that will be school time uses, so there'll be an increase in that. Right now, no one is really utilizing the lower parking lot, so there's adequate parking if the lower parking lot is included. But there is a bit of a log jam up by Croker Hall on parking. So eventually, what we would like to do, and whether we should include it in this master plan or not, is look to add parking there. In the last time that Austine came to get a change in their master plan, they had a possible parking lot up there. Again, we'd have to go through our initial analysis, we'd have to go through stormwater to get approval of that, and we'll probably be doing that as well. High Five is looking to build probably in this area, so when we come in, we'll probably come in at the same time with that for something with respect to that. But you are right, from the actual use right now, it's difficult to compare it apples to oranges to what Austine was using. but we believe that the parking-wise and flow and traffic-wise, it seems a little bit less active use than that. But again, because the master plan that exists was specifically for Austine, we felt that we needed to come in, and the question became, are we going to try to amend the existing PUD? It made more sense to start from scratch. So we're welcoming your input as to what you need with respect to that. And again, we're going to combine this with the plan to create a condominium regime so that different entities will own their own future. Inspire has indicated that they have probably have a desire in acquiring Croker. High Five, again, they're going to be building their own separate facility, and Winston Prouty will be owning Vermont Hall. Holton Hall, we're not sure whether that's going to be owned by a nonprofit or for-profit. The advantage of the condominium regime is it allows a little bit simpler decision-making for the listers with respect to determining what is and what is not tax exempt. We're going through that process right now. We have different opinions than they do, and the condominium regime will make that simpler for both sides.
I thought your proposal to start low and upscale, if necessary, would be similar to what we would want. It was hard for me because there were so many different levels of potential with each building to imagine or visualize whether 160 is right or wrong. But it seems like a lot, and you've got the nice benefit of having more or less your own road network in there, sealed by a single exit.
And the traffic flow works well too, because it effectively becomes one way once you're in and loops around Holton Hall, so that again we have that bottleneck at Croker, which we'll need to ideally we'll need to address that if the uses stay the same. But that's I guess my last thing, I apologize to other small issues. We'd like to consider a waiver from actual landscape architect design with respect to this. One of the great things about the campus, as you're all aware, is the openness of it. It was so open to me that when I went and looked to see what we'd have to do for landscaping, I was amazed at how many trees there actually are on the campus itself. So what we would look to do is probably supplement a little bit around some of the buildings, maybe some lower shrubs, but there are also a number of ornamental trees that are named throughout the campus, and we of course would leave those. We've tried to be very empathetic with the deaf community. It's a very difficult blow for them. I've had deep background. I worked both for the bank and also for Winston Prouty on this project. I've had 10 to a dozen meetings with the deaf community to try to make sure that they're going to continue to have access to it. And then the other piece is that there are 2 orphan parcels straddling I-91. One is over on Maple Street on this side, and the other is on the other side of I-91, which we're trying to figure out the best resting place for those. They don't have any use to the campus itself. Both parcels back on residential abutters, whether we can work with them, whether we can work with the town, whether we can work with the state, we don't know yet, but we would look to have those removed from the PUD and actually removed from ownership.
How big are they?
I'm thinking they...
One is 1 acre, and then this weird shaped one, I have no idea.
Yeah, I'd say an acre, and the other one, which looks like a barbed arrowhead, is probably between 1.5 acres and maybe 1.75 acres.
That happened because the interstate was built, I take it?
In part because the interstate was built.
Thank you. Can I take this?
Yeah. So this is the 1 acre right across, and then this is where Chestnut Street is, and this now is the highlighted area in the blue.
So among the balls that we've been juggling, that hasn't been picked off the table yet. And I think that's a rough overview of of where we are. I can go through the specific criteria if you'd like, and let me see. The other things that I have just to say is that we also are trying to decide, as far as looking at the land usage itself, whether we're going to be incorporating substantial alternative energy that would include the possibility of solar panels, the possibility of a mini district wood pellet heating plant to serve the campus. Again, those are down the line. Obviously, if we're going to put solar panels, they're either going to go on a roof or they'll be more likely on the ground. We'd be coming back for that, as well as the multi-district heating. We would assume that anything such as replacing the existing maintenance building, we'd be back in before you. What we want to do right now is we want to get off the ground with respect to the general master plan, knowing that we're going to come back in for other things, and also get the subdivision in place so that we can create the condominium regime and hopefully close some sales so that we're not carrying the debt load that is not part of our core mission.
You saw the memo from the planning department?
I don't think I did.
Here, it's 2 paragraphs.
It's the shortest thing I've seen on this project since I started.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just shows the qualities. So
I mean, a memo that small,
yeah,
after receiving something like this is really quite an endorsement.
I appreciate that. The shortcut I say is it would be a shame that the first thing that people would see coming into Vermont would be a dying and decaying campus. And Winston Prouty has taken a big leap of faith to try to both make it work, make their plans for increased usage work, and also to try to find home for some good nonprofits. We're more than welcome. We're more than willing to start with a draft of a conservation covenant. We'd welcome any comments, and I don't know if that should be funneled in or should we just start with a draft and work with that.
I would suggest that you look to Brian for guidance.
Okay.
I think that everybody on the board is very familiar with this parcel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. And generally, the fact that it is by far, it's really wilderness with a patch of development in it.
Yeah, and the intent is to keep that, get a high five because of their nature. They're going to want to put this back in here so that they have good access to both ways. They'll probably take the seasonal cabins and fit them up for year-round use. But we don't anticipate making much of a change on the footprint. And again, we're trying to incorporate as many community uses as possible. We'll be probably dedicating the top floor of Holton Hall to use as a common area, conference room for both tenants and owners on campus and people offsite campus. We're working with Jeff Brewer from Brattleboro Soccer Association for their continued and higher use of the lower soccer field. So we welcome not only comments, but thoughts that you have as community members on how we can make this a even better place.
The situation with the condominiumization is not something I'm against, but my suspicion is that the reason the planning department said that is that there's a concern as to the ability of one entity to control the property's use once things are condominiumized.
Oh,
you want to avoid sort of an anarchy where you give people enough rights over enough space in the what had been sort of single entity control.
If you don't mind, although it's outside of jurisdiction, in some ways I'll address that. We looked at both a planned unit where it's not condominiumized, but one association owns the common area and a condominium regime. I was going for the first, I ended up with the second because of the way the statutes read. And the statutes read that if you have a condominium, as opposed to the other thing, that if you meet certain criteria, which we do, you can have the declarant or the developer hold rights for a longer period of time. You can, and we're going to create that type of a condominium so that we as Winston Prouty continue to hold the declarant rights and strong rights with respect to how the overall campus and the common area is used, but still giving people the rights with respect to voting on budgets, etc. We will be keeping a strong hand in the development, and our anticipation is that will allow us to both put property in and take property out of the common areas so that we can comply with any things that are needed for the planned unit development that goes into place and whatever the town might want with respect to that.
I mean, having to do with how, say, pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic go through the property. I could see that changing a lot depending on the uses that are dictated by the people.
And that's, yes, and we would probably have a unanimous vote on most of those things, so we could work into that. If there is some concerns with respect to that the town or the board would want us to incorporate into those documents, we'll be doing those. I've started the draft of those documents. They're going to be lengthy, but we want to address all of that. And again, the other thing is, as I said, we're trying to keep the footprints as low as possible so that the common area predominates. And that way we can make that subject to all access things. There's a number of things that are referred to in here that aren't here. Lighting plan, things like that. We anticipate working through those things. As I just flipped through real quickly on the criteria, there aren't a lot that pop open that are going to create issues if we can get the waiver on parking, so that that can be looked at as you say, as we start small and go bigger. That'll be helpful. We'd like the waiver on landscaping. We could live with hiring a landscape architect, but we're trying to keep our budget workable, and we think that it's loved the way it is, and it's appreciated by everyone. So, questions, comments?
To me, the landscaping is a non-issue given the nature of the parcel. I don't know if you guys disagree.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You can't see it from the road, basically, anyway. You gonna bring the big Santa back?
Well, it's interesting enough. The big Santa is actually in the subdivision that you just looked at, prior sketch review. The Santa was moved off-site during the time when the bank was in control for insurance purposes, even though it went to an insurance agent, of all people. But and there have been people who have been asking for it back.
You gotta bring it back.
Yeah.
Make it a condition.
Just cut our negotiating legs right from under us.
Yeah, right. I really don't know this. Is there a history of 18-wheelers or trailer trucks that do deliveries and drop-offs, or do you contemplate that becoming something that's going to happen?
Now and then.
There probably were. We'll probably be coordinating cleaning services. There was probably a much higher traffic with respect to that when they were operating the cafeteria. None of the tenants really use...
the kitchen people, the food prep?
The food people, those are...
It's all local.
It's all local.
So it's like Black River Produce Truck
Yeah.
versus Cisco.
Maybe a 20-foot box truck is about the biggest that they get. And the turnaround... the turnarounds are almost double with respect to that. It's hard to see on this one, but there's the turnaround that almost all the traffic uses here. Then there's a trash area here, but there's a greater turnaround that works for there, and then the deliveries have been there. So,
was there a lot of pedestrian safety marking or limitation there because it was a school for the hard of hearing that you're going to leave in place? Or
There really wasn't any, and we're trying to figure out a lot of this, the in-campus signage issues, because we're trying to coordinate the parking, not requirements, but wishes of everyone. But we will be increasing things like the safety signage for the trails to notify for that. I don't think there's really, and there may not even be any on Maple anymore for deaf area. I think there's one. Yeah, there is one, and then maybe there's one in the entrance. But we'll be arranging that. Inspire is a school for autism. They have a lot of pedestrian traffic during the day of their students. They're committed to outdoor activities. So we'll be looking a lot towards whatever we can do to make it as safe as possible. Again, we'll be operating and expanding from daycare or from toddler going down to infant. So that and Garland, we're all concerned about the pedestrian safety.
There's one place when you turn around and you're going to go back out where there is a sign that says there's watch out for, I forget what it says, but it says something about pedestrians or children
We
crossing.
come around the back of Bolton Hall.
Yeah.
We'll probably be adding rather than detracting on that kind of signage.
Brian, what are your thoughts on this? Too premature? Yeah, I had the same problem. I mean, it's a really, it's a very helpful document, but there were I felt like I was playing three-dimensional chess as I tried to imagine in my mind's eye the issues that would arise on an application. I mean, you know, vulnerable population that's going to be on foot a lot is, I'm sure, something you guys are very concerned with, and we'll have a plan with you when you come.
And the last plan that Austine brought in included as a possible thought was a turnaround here between Croker and Holden to cut things off. Now that doesn't, you know, change for these two users, but would change here. So we'll probably be considering that, but I think we would, given that it won't affect the drop-offs of two of the facilities, we'd probably lean more towards the additional parking to make it safer.
And the right-of-way you were asking about at the beginning of your presentation, that goes to the architecturally interesting house that's sort of up in
the Frank Lloyd Wrong house, yes.
I like it, but I'm just making sure that I'm thinking about the same thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, that was something that I came through when I was going through the criteria, that and I'll talk with Brian about that. It looks like it's not waivable. So it's really just slicing that line to make it from 1.7 to 1.5 and asking for a waiver to 25 feet instead of 50 feet.
Yeah, it's a one-lane driveway, right?
Yeah, but it's not about this driveway. It's about this driveway. It's about this access, having access to the lot, because it says if it does not have access on Maple Street. And our feeling was it would not be a good idea to create access on Maple Street, both topographically and for additional this. For the number of limited things, to have two sites there didn't make sense. And yes, this is very much a draft and very much, again, premature in a lot of things, but our feeling is we want it to be before you as early as possible, and we did that with the town, with everyone in the town, to try to figure out, are we heading in the right direction, and are there speed bumps and stop signs that we need to be aware of?
I think the answer is yes, and I think that this context is going to be helpful to us going forward, but I feel a little bit at a loss for concrete responses, except to those couple of concrete issues, the right of way and the other waiver.
Well, if we're looking at that, then does it make sense to schedule another sketch review before we go for full? Because this is, and also we are understanding that this is the first plan unit development that you are seeing, and that Brian is seeing, and working and stretching within that, we don't want to create a precedent that doesn't work the next time around.
It sort of depends how far along you are with the variables. I mean, I don't think it's sensible to just pick a time period and say, well, come back in X number of weeks. because you should. I don't want to waste your time.
Well, if looking through the criteria, the variables that we have, if our parking, if we're looking at the uses and we're looking at giving the documents and putting out the covenants, then there are some considerations that we have to work with how we draw the specific lines. But most of the criteria are not, they're not that difficult to handle with this project because we're not changing anything right now, and we are clearly deferring, saying, we build a new maintenance building, we'll be in. High Five wants to do something, they'll be in. And I don't think we can afford to wait until we have all those questions answered. Things that we would look at are, do you want us to put possible proposed parking in now, even though we know we're not going to do it?
I'm almost sure the answer to that is no.
And that was my guess.
With the exception of adequate provision for disabled people.
And we have, there are some designated handicap spots. We have 6 designated patient spots in front of Holton Hall because we have the audiologists and the Vermont Association for Blind and Visually Impaired, both of which have clients who need extra time and close parking. But we haven't worked on designating handicap spots yet. Austine did not seem to push that too hard on things. We could probably do some more work on the traffic flow issues, given that this area down here will be, there's drop-offs right here, then there's going to be drive around here and drop-offs here for daycare, for the top floor where Winston Prouty will be. So we could probably be a little bit more specific on that, and in doing that, maybe we'll talk with Brian and see what we can do with respect to signage, and also that. On general signage, we haven't come up with a design yet. There's a lot of Austine signs around. Everybody knows they don't want nor will they get a big sign. Mm-hmm. The one large sign that is visible from the interstate, we haven't figured that out yet because we don't have a name for the campus yet. We'll be filing.
Santa.
I don't think we want to call it Santa Land. So we'll probably, we'll be doing some signage here and then some smaller signage in there with respect to that. So, and we'll probably we're filing to change the name.
Of the road?
Yeah, from Austine Drive to Winston Prouty, which means we'll give up, because that'll probably become BMC Way or whatever.
I expect that our disposition is not going to be towards laying down new pavement for parking lot, but having something that we can understand as to traffic flow, safety, and something for the vulnerable people who have sort of different, separate sectors within this plan where they'll be congregated.
And the only events that occur on campus are, we are keeping it open for the Austine alumni. They have 1 or 2 events a year. One coming up in June. That's about, they anticipate maybe as high as 80 people. So there's more than adequate parking because that'll be on a weekend event. And the only other events are weekend events that New England Center for Circus Arts has in Croker. And those have all been weekend and after hour events. It is all the tenants other than NECA are Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Some weekends for High Five.
When you're thinking about signage, it might be helpful, especially if you're condoing various sections for various functions, that your signage points to that. It says, what's in what building, and because it can be confusing.
Yeah.
And I think it will get more confusing.
Yeah.
There's
There's signage here, and then there's signage on the buildings of Croker and a little bit of signage in front of Holton. Since the majority of signage, other than this, will be interior, we anticipate that we'll put more up, and probably more than might be accepted on Main Street, but we'll be there for safety and for traffic flow.
You're gonna rebuild the ski jump?
No.
Yeah, where the pool was.
We've spoken with Liz Richards, and one ski jump in Brattleboro.
Did any members of the public wish to speak to this application? I know you're not really the public, but I know you've been here for 2 hours, and if you want to, please. Okay.
We've had public, we've had discussions with the parents of Winston Prouty with respect to safety, traffic, and those concerns. So we're keeping them involved, but we haven't had, the only people who've come to comment with us are people who they want the Santa, they want the disc golf course.
I love that Santa. So hallmark of my youth.
So we're working on all of those. And the other issue that we'll want to resolve is get some clarity on these three parcels, size,
My expectation, given the nature of what that parcel is going to be for, I think we're going to be very liberal in terms of what we expect for conservation use, if the numbers there.
I think that it should work out relatively easily. We've got some ideas. Unfortunately, nothing was really incorporated in the last round, but you know, I think it probably makes sense for me to work on a draft, and I'll get that to Brian, and we can get comments that way.
Is there an old road that may not actually be a right-of-way that cuts through the south side of that? It goes to the old town junkyard?
Down here?
In that area, it's hard for me to look at that.
This is about as far as I've gone. I haven't walked over here to see, but I know that there are, I think there is some old either logging or other roads here, and I have to go up and visit and see if we can get a better location on Upland.
Okay.
So that
There is a road in off of Guilford Road.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a back in through here that cuts in.
Yeah,
And the old plan, last plan, dealt with about 20 acres here reserved for future residential. The reality is that the absorption rate on that is not worth it. We would rather have this area here used for development because we have some parties interested or talk of possible senior assisted living there.
Okay.
Just so I can keep walking.
Oh, yes.
Any further comments by members of the board?
Well, I just know that the highlight of Eric's Christmas season is putting up that Santa Claus.
It's cold when it goes up and it's cold when it comes down.
Well, if you want to come back for another review, we're happy to entertain you.
Yeah.
Why don't we'll have...
I'd suggest that you, well,
I'm
don't control
going to
that.
spend some time. I'm going to spend some time with Brian on taking into account those issues and any issues that he has mentally that are there, because although it is, and I've said this whole project was like trying to put a jigsaw together in a wind tunnel. With respect to setting out a master plan and a subdivision, although it's a lot of pieces, I think we can get our hands around them if we're going in steps and get some input back on, for example, on parking. When do you want us to come back? If we're, you know, at a lease up rate, at a use rate, do we measure what's the easiest way that makes sense? And we'd suggest a lease rate because that's easy for us to judge.
Is that it would be based on the occupancy as opposed to trying to staff?
Yeah.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
I just remind you that just because you're at what might seem to be a final phase of application, with a project this big, it's not unprecedented for us to continue it so that the applicant can deal with something.
Understood, and that was also one reason why, as incomplete as it may be, we wanted to get here as early as possible. Winston Prouty plans on being in there in July.
Right.
We're having, we've got our permits in place. It's going to be a marvelous facility, and we're really excited about it.
Okay, well,
So thanks for your time.
we're happy to help in any way we can. Brian's a great resource. It's easier to call him than to call us all on a conference line, you know?
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
We'll work out.
sure. Thanks for staying.
Thanks.
Nice to see you all. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
No, we need a real motion. Come
So
on,
moved.
Robert's rules. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes 4-0.